Welcome, my name is Erin Chmielewski. I'm a founding member of North Bay Organizing Project's Petaluma table and a permanent resident of Sonoma County. So first, I just want to say sorry, there's no sign language. And we're very, very sad about that. But we will continue on. We are lucky to be graced with John Mutz, Ernesto Olivares, and Mark Essick. So. North Bay Organizing Project Petaluma welcomes everyone to tonight's public forum. Tonight is about providing the public with the opportunity to come face to face with the next Sonoma County Sheriff. For some of us, this is our only opportunity. But North Bay Organizing Project is a multiracial base-building organization composed of 21 institutions that unite to build leadership and grassroots power for social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. NBOP's Petaluma chapter is made up of people who contribute to Petaluma as residents, neighbors, students, workers, and employers. Some of us have lived here and worked here all of our lives. The issues that we do focus on are decided by our membership, and we work together to effect change in our local community by organizing neighbors and residents who may otherwise feel very voiceless. We also collaborate with other local groups to harness collective power and effect change. The local groups who are co-hosting this event with us tonight are Indivisible Petaluma and Rapid Response Network. Yay! We want to give a special thanks to our co-sponsors, St. Vincent de Paul Church, who has graciously provided the space for us, and Petaluma Day Laborers Initiative, Petaluma Tomorrow, Petaluma Progressives, and Petaluma Community Relations Council. Also, like to do a final thank you to Vidas. Tonight, we have an opportunity to gain a little bit of insight to the three men who are candidates for the position of Sonoma County Sheriff. Let's see, so we are going to be asking questions that are centered around the experiences and concerns of the typically voiceless members of our community. And I want you to note that some of us have really strong accents when we speak English. Some of us may not look like we come from here. Some of us are houseless, and some of us aren't even old enough to vote. But ultimately, we're all members of Sonoma County, and we expect to be respected and valued no matter what our status. We're excited for the opportunity to welcome a new sheriff who will work with us and not against us. We have solicited questions from our network of community partners, and we came up with 5 that we'll be able to present to the 3 of you. It is our hope that these questions will provide the public more insight into the kind of community partner you will be. The audience will also have an opportunity to ask some questions. We have note cards on everyone's chairs if you'd like to fill them out. Please make sure to do so and turn them into a staff member by around 6:40 or a little earlier. We will provide some reminders, so no worries about that. Okay, I'd like to now introduce Zaira Garcia for the sheriff job description.
By the way, you guys can sit down, thank you.
Sorry, muting.
Hello everyone, my name is Zaira Garcia. I am the North Bay Organizing Project co-chair. I am also a queer woman of color, a mother, daughter of undocumented parents, and a former DACA recipient. Tonight I am here to give the sheriff's job description. The textbook definition, responsible for keeping the peace and enforcing the law at the county level. The people's definition, wanting a sheriff that will treat people of color with the same respect, dignity, and safety that is so often afforded to heavily armed non-people of color mass murderers. We aren't asking for you to shoot and kill the countless non-people of color who've murdered scores of innocent people, only to peacefully take it into custody. We want a sheriff to treat people of color at least as well as those. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaira, for that powerful job description. We'll now be hearing opening statements from the candidates. Each candidate will have 90 seconds, and we will start with John, and then rotate through the candidates for subsequent responses. Gentlemen, please be considerate of the timekeeper. Sorry about the children, but timekeeper is Garcia straight and center. Okay, starting with John.
Thank you very much. First thing I want to say is thank you to our sponsors who made this forum possible. Those are the sponsors who are out doing the heavy lifting to make our community safe and secure. So I honor them. So my name is John Mutz, candidate for Sonoma County Sheriff. And I want you all to know that we are really at an extraordinary opportunity here with this election. We actually have, for the first time in over 2 decades, the opportunity for the community to select the best candidate for sheriff. And that's important. So what really differentiates the three of us, all good men, is I have extraordinary experience. I was a station commander for 6 years, a captain for 10. And I have been a resource not only locally here in Sonoma County, but also in the state and nationally, in the area of how do we create the best practices for law enforcement and restore trust in the community. And that's my expertise. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos, me llamo Ernesto Olivares. Gracias por venir a este foro tan importante para la elección del Sheriff del Condado de Santa Rosa. Thank you all for coming this evening to this very important forum for the election of our next Sonoma County Sheriff. And I really look forward to sharing more about my experience, my history as we go out throughout the evening. But I am an immigrant myself. I came to the United States when I was 2 years old with my parents. I tell youth when I speak to them that I was born dirt poor in Mexico, and by saying that I mean our house had dirt floors. But our parents brought us to the United States where we lived a better life of poverty. Our home had floors. It was plywood, bare plywood, but it was a floor. My father pushed me out of farm work, he told me that I could do anything that I wanted to be. I could be anything I wanted to be. And that was possible because he was able to obtain citizenship for himself and those of us who were born in Mexico. And that was a big gift of my father's because it gave me hope. It gave me hope about what I can do here in this country. And I pursued all of my dreams and goals, becoming a police officer back in the 70s, working for nearly 30 years at the San Jose Police Department, being a council member and mayor, working locally across the state nationally to help communities build safe and strong communities that reduce violence, and also to work very hard to help communities identify strategies to improve trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. So I look forward to speaking to you for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Essick. I'm a captain with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. I've been there about 24 years. This August will make 24 years for me. I grew up here in the North Bay, grew up in Novato, and spent most of my life here in the North Bay. Left for a short time to go to college. But what I really want to kind of bring home to you in this first 90 seconds that we have to talk is a vision. I've realized I've been at the Sheriff's Office for a long time. I know what we do well, and I know what we need to fix. My vision for the Sheriff's Office to take us into the future is one of accountability and transparency. It's one of diversity in our hiring, and it's one of community policing and community service. Now, in the short 90 seconds I have right now, I'm not going to be able to dive into all three of those topics real deeply, but I think as we go throughout the night, and you hear the questions from the audience and the questions we're going to be asked, you'll begin to see a difference, and the difference is the experienced leadership that I bring. 24 years. I know what we do well. I know what we need to fix. The folks at the Sheriff's Office trust me. They've endorsed me. And they know that I'm the one to lead that change at the Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. I have turned off, sorry. Wonderful. So now that we know a little bit about the candidates, let's go ahead and move into questions. Just a reminder to the candidates, we'll have 1 minute to answer each question. Okay, our first question will be for Ernesto starting. This question is provided by Petaluma Rapid Response Network. A large portion of the law enforcement encounters involve people with psychiatric disorders. In fact, individuals with untreated mental illnesses are 16 times more likely to be killed when encountering police and stopped. Our county has not been immune to these instances. What policy or policies would you pursue to significantly reduce these killings?
I'm sorry, to reduce what?
These killings.
Yes. I think fundamentally it comes down to training. Law enforcement professionals go through a lot of training on a regular basis. There's mandated training that they have to take that's mandated by the state. And a lot of the training that we do is on areas around the use of force. Firearms training, because you have to really ingrain that in the officers. But absent from that, though, is that regular ongoing training on the interaction with people. It's identifying the signs of somebody maybe suffering from mental illness or having just a rough day. I think all of us in this room have had a rough day at some point or another. And so it's recognizing that, but I think it's incumbent upon us to develop policies that require more training that is mandated by the state and to have it regularly, so it's ingrained, so it becomes second nature to them. Just like firearms training becomes second nature to the officers when they're out on the street, so should the tools that you have in dealing with people and trying to reduce anxiety just by your presence, the words that you use to bring somebody down and identify them. And I'm out of time, but
Thank you, yes.
All right. With 60-second answers, you guys are going to keep us on our toes. Mental health is something that's very important to me. It's something I've worked on for the last 10 years at the Sheriff's Office. After the Jeremiah Chass incident in 2007, Sheriff Bill Cogbill came to me, and I was a newly appointed sergeant. He said, "Mark, we're going to create a program at the Sheriff's Office that improves the way that we interact with folks who have mental illness, people who are in crisis." So with a little bit of reins from the sheriff, I put together a program that's a nationally instituted program. It's called Crisis Intervention Training, or CIT. I'm very proud that that program is celebrating its 10th year at the Sheriff's Office. We've trained over 500 peace officers in this county, not just Sheriff's Office employees, Petaluma Police, Cloverdale, Healdsburg. We open it up to everybody. So we get people through this class. It teaches them about some of the problems that people face. We do real life scenarios on how to teach people how to better train and better adapt to situations where they're dealing with people with mental illness. And I'm very proud of it. And we've been recognized. We've got a lot of work to do, though. Thank you.
This still continues to be a challenge that we have not effectively dealt with. We still continue to have deaths that involve a mental illness and a breakdown. So training is important. However, unless you alter the culture and evoke compassion and reverence for people, no amount of training on top of that is going to be effective. Also, one of the things that really makes a big difference, let's say autism. If a deputy knows someone who has autism, he or she can better relate to that person and be more effective in terms of calming them down. The last thing is that we've seen an increase in the use of tasers in mentally ill people. Tasers are not an effective way to deal with someone in a mental health crisis, and we've got to stop that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the thoughtful answers. Real quick, I'd like to briefly remind anyone who wants to turn in a question, just go ahead and fill that out and hand it to the staff members that are on the sides. Thank you. Okay, so question 2 is provided by Petaluma Day Laborers Initiative. We'll be starting with Mark. So, how have you been successful in the past in minimizing the impact of unconscious racial profiling in your own professional behavior and in those whom you have supervised? Please explain.
I'm sorry, racial bias?
Unconscious racial
bias?
profiling.
Okay, thank you. So, my very first assignment at the Sheriff's Office was working in the Roseland community. As we know about Roseland and Santa Rosa, it's about 70% Latino, And my very first assignment, I was like 26 years old. And having grown up in a household in northern Marin County, Nevada, I hadn't had a lot of experiences interacting with people who didn't look like me, didn't talk like me. And it was a huge, huge learning point for me. And I'm actually very, very grateful that I had that experience. We all carry a lens, and that lens can be many, many types of bias, can be many types of different things that we've experienced in our life. So I think it's always important to be cognizant that everyone views the world from a different lens, and it's the diversity amongst us that makes us stronger. So I would continue to do a program that we have now, which is the racial bias training program, unconscious bias training program. It's mandated by the state, but it really doesn't go far enough. We need to continue training, train, and more experience, more experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be John. Okay.
I'm grateful for my experience in this area. I'm recognized not only in the state but nationally as an expert in how we go about reducing racial profiling and dealing with bias. I can tell you that racial profiling and unconscious bias is embedded in the criminal justice system, not only in law enforcement. And it's through awareness, not just cognitive awareness, but actually experiential awareness, that we become aware of our biases and deal with them. How I've dealt with it personally is reaching out to what the social psychologists call as social contact. And that's where you have a significant part of your life where you interact with people of color, people from the LGBTQ community, and really debunk the unconditional biases that we have. That's the way I've done it.
I think we all have some sort of bias or another, and I think many of us have also experienced it. I have experienced it in my role in law enforcement when I first started back in the 70s. I had to put up with the Mexican jokes and other things that happened around me that were very explicit, not just the implicit stuff either. So it's that self-awareness, I think. It's understanding that it does happen in law enforcement and we have to change it. The things that I have done in my work in Santa Rosa was to work in helping people identify some of these biases, but also develop programs within the city on inclusion. How do we build inclusive workplaces where everybody feels comfortable and safe and happy coming to work? And that starts with the employees. It's setting that tone inside the department so that we are a welcoming place, so that if somebody chooses to apply to come to work with us, they feel like they do belong. And so it's how do we overcome that, and how do we have that frank discussion? Because oftentimes we don't talk about issues like race. It's uncomfortable sometimes for people, but we need to get out of that comfort zone and have the conversation and acknowledge that racism and some of these issues do exist in our communities.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we're moving on to question 3, which has been provided by North Bay Organizing Project Immigration Task Force. We'll be starting with John. What kind of training is in place for sheriff staff to address the hostility and the language barriers that some residents of the county experience during encounters with the department? Are you satisfied with this training?
You know, law enforcement always has ongoing training in this area, and you really have to look at the effectiveness of that training. So you go to the community and you ask them, is this training having an impact on how you're being treated and how you're being engaged by deputies? That's the reality check. So when we do this training, and it's been ongoing, but we have not been able to gain enough ground in this area. We still face major breakdowns when it comes to dealing in communities of color. So it's constant feedback from those communities, constant training, and being guided by that feedback. That's the reality check, is what does the community say? Is this training really being effective? That is a shortcoming of law enforcement, to go out and get that feedback. It's absolutely essential. Nothing will change without it.
it's important for us to develop some real-time dashboards for the public to be able to see what changes are occurring within law enforcement. Because we do need to treat people with respect and dignity when we contact them all the time. And if you want to see a place where that doesn't work, it's go online to the yard counseling videos. Some of you have probably seen them on YouTube. That's not how you treat people, and that's a form of discipline where the sheriff's office actually has a policy where they can go to somebody in their cell who's being loud and just boisterous and having a bad day, pull them out with people who look like SWAT officers, take them out into a yard and pretty much dogpile them and berate them and berate them and berate them, trying to get them to comply with the rules. That's not how you treat somebody. What kind of respect is being built there? What's going to happen when that person is released and goes back out into the streets and interacts with other law enforcement professionals? Is there going to be a level of trust there? Probably not. So those are the kind of things that we need to undo and make sure that there is strong accountability within the sheriff's office on how we treat people every day, all the time. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, it starts with customer service. And until everyone at the sheriff's office appreciates that you, all of you in this room, everyone in our community are our customers, and that we're here to serve you, we can't get anywhere. And to that end, one of the things that we just did recently is we brought in a customer service training expert, not a cop, but a person who's actually a corporate person who's really interested in delivering customer service. We had all of our deputies spend 3 days in this class, and they all came out of it very interesting. They came out of it and they were very happy. They're like, wow, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. So that's part of the situation just to start with, customer service. The second part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is that CIT training. Crisis intervention training teaches people how to relate to others who are not necessarily seeing the world through the same lens. It also teaches people about de-escalation techniques. And, it also teaches people that we are all in this together. We're all in this together. Thank you.
Quick last reminder to get all your question cards into staff before we get to the audience. Okay, so question 4 is provided by the Latinx Student Congress of Casa Grande High School. Please note that they're led by students of color from 9 high schools across Sonoma County. And they state that every day they see youth that look like them brutalized by law enforcement. This question will start with Ernesto. The students ask, what is wrong with us that we can fix so that law enforcement doesn't shoot us and beat us?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're human beings, you're people, you're members of our community. You're somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's sister, somebody's niece. Like I said earlier, everybody has the right to be treated with respect and dignity all the time. Sometimes we do get out of hand out there, right? And I'm just saying, even in the public, and you respond to that, but there's also ways of responding to that so that it doesn't instill anger in somebody. It's important that I treat people with respect, because it's not only because it's the right thing to do, because if we're going to work collaboratively in our community to identify issues and to work on them together, everybody has to have an opportunity to do that. And if we alienate each other, especially our youth, I saw our youth speak up during the March for Our Lives. They have a strong voice. We need to respect that in them, because they are our future. They're going to start voting this year, next year, and the following year, and they're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Our youth have a voice, and we need to hear it. Thank you.
I certainly agree with Ernesto in that area. There's absolutely nothing wrong with our youth. Nothing at all. You know, I have a 21-year-old son and an almost 19-year-old daughter. Her birthday's next weekend. And they've grown up in a time that's far different than when I grew up, and probably many of you grew up. They have to talk about school shootings and what do they do in case someone comes to their classroom with a gun. And those are things I didn't experience. So it is about building that relationship. It's about having a team of people around you as a sheriff or as a leader who give you advice. Not just the people that you want to hear what they want to say, or are going to tell you what you want to hear and stroke your ego. The people who actually will challenge you, the people who tell you what they're dealing with every day and what scares them, what their concerns are. I've committed from the very get-go to have a community advisory council as a sheriff, and that council is going to be made up of everyone, from every gender, every identity, every sexuality, every race, and age as well. So a sheriff or a leader cannot serve the public unless they're hearing from everyone. Thank you.
Well, first of all, that the statements are disturbing, that youth have that experience, and they have those fears, and it's not acceptable. We were at a candidate forum at Elsie Allen High School recently, and the juniors and seniors were classmates of Andy Lopez. Now, Andy's death has occurred, over 4 years ago, and these students still hold the grief of losing their friend. So that's part of where they're coming from. Now, when they tried to express their grief, yes, it showed up as anger. They were suppressed. They faced a military response. We've got to go to them and assure them that we are there to be with them and help them and empower them. Thank you.
Okay, question 5. We're going to go ahead and start with Mark. The question is provided by North Bay Organizing Project's Immigration Task Force. Just a reminder, yeah, we're going to get some cards in. If you have any last minute cards, give them to the staff members. Thank you. Sorry about that interruption. So, National Sheriff Association has taken a stance against California's sanctuary laws. The Department of Justice is suing California for adopting and enforcing these sanctuary laws. As a state, California is advocating and working to protect its immigrant community. And given that Petaluma is also a sanctuary city, how will you, as Sonoma County's next sheriff, engage with the communities that are vilified by your professional association, but are recognized by the state government to be vital contributors to our community?
All right, that's a big question. 60-second answer version. We have a system in this country that's broken. The federal law, state law, they have failed to do comprehensive immigration reform. And in California, we've been stuck in the middle. So our legislators here have tried to come up with the best compromise they could possibly do to serve all the people in California. That was SB 54, also known as the California Values Act. And that set some very strict guidelines on how law enforcement should deal with the federal government and how they should deal with ICE. Now, I don't have time to go into all that detail because it is kind of a long piece of legislation. But what I can say is that the sheriff's office came out ahead of that. We knew the legislation was changing, and we supported it because as a cop, my #1 job is to serve the community when they need help. 24 years, I have never asked someone their immigration status, ever. It's against our policy to ask someone their immigration status. We don't do it. We're there to serve you. We're there to take care of your needs. And if one of my deputies asks your immigration status, they're going to be in my office hearing from me because it's unacceptable.
I'm proud of our position as a sanctuary city. We have got to make it clear that we are an advocate for the immigrant community. They are what makes our county work. They are hardworking families. SB 54 was intended to protect them. However, it hasn't gone far enough. It's simply an entry floor level, not a ceiling. And today, the jail is still facilitating the release of immigrants who end up in ICE custody. We have a lot of work to do in this area. Who we can work with are the sponsors here: Indivisible, NBOP, Comitabita. Those are the organizations that we have to be an advocate for and work for.
For decades, we have been asking the federal government to develop some meaningful immigration reform and to provide a path to citizenship for our immigrants, and they have continued to fail us. And they push their problems down to us at the local level. Our role here at the local level is to protect our residents, and our immigrant community are part of that community. They're us. They're out there working hard. They are strong members and big contributors to our community overall. And we can't treat them differently either, not just as law enforcement, but even as residents ourselves. So we have to stop that. I mean, we have a census coming up in a couple of years, and now we're talking about adding a question in there about somebody's legal status in California. It doesn't matter. What I say is everyone counts or nobody counts, right? So we need to get rid of that. So as long as we keep doing that, we're going to keep making them feel as other. We're making them flee. During the fires, they fled to the coast because they didn't trust coming to the shelters. We need to stop that. We need to start treating them with respect as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, great. Let's go ahead and move on to audience questions. We'll be starting with John. Our first question from the audience is, what do you think is the most successful way for law enforcement to approach the issue of people camping out in public places?
The most effective approach in people without housing, camping out, is to use the resources in hand and make sure that we don't criminalize people who are camping out, who don't have housing. If we get into that area, we make things worse. Then they end up in our jail system. Many of the challenges we face are with mental health and drug and alcohol issues, and people who have just had the worst experience in their life and have lost everything. Those are the people out on the street. So we have to work with Housing Action and other groups that have expertise in this area. Law enforcement doesn't have the expertise. We're only there to make sure that we keep the peace and people are safe and secure. So we allow that to happen and allow the professionals to do the work they need to do to impact this challenge.
As public safety professionals, we need to look at our role in dealing with those without homes, that it no longer can be just about our enforcement role, because historically we were the ones that were called in to deal with some of these issues, but we need to look at ourselves as a partner in a community-wide effort to end homelessness. So the solution is a home. That's the solution to homelessness. And one of the things that we're doing, that we started doing in Santa Rosa, is moving towards evidence-based practices on how we do that, and that means housing first. How do we get somebody into a home or some supportive housing? We can't really address issues while somebody's out on the streets. How do we develop things like coordinated entry, so you don't have somebody without a home going to different points to try to get into a shelter? How do we have one point of entry so we can assess who is the most vulnerable and how they can be given first priority in getting the space? But it's not about moving people out. I think when we do have to move people out, we have to make sure that every single person that is there has been offered a place to stay before they can be actually evicted from that location. Thank you.
So having worked with the homeless population quite a bit throughout my career, what I can tell you is that homeless sweeps do not work. I'll repeat that, homeless sweeps do not work. All it does is take people who are already going through probably the worst time of their life and shove them into the eye of the law enforcement under threat of arrest to move. And all they do is they move to the next spot and they get harassed again. So until you wrap services around someone and provide them with the mental health, the drug and alcohol counseling and services that they need, nothing's going to change. I have a unique position because I'm in this position, I know about it. I know that the people who we're interacting with, 68% of them suffer from mental illness who are homeless. So 68% of our 68% of our homeless population has a mental health problem. 50%, slightly higher than 50% of the population has a drug or alcohol problem. So until we're addressing those most basic things, putting them in housing is a great idea, but we have to get to the root core of why they're homeless in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question 2, we start with Ernesto. How will you protect and defend the LGBTQ plus community?
I will continue doing what I have been doing for all my career. I've been working with these groups for a number of years, going back even as a sergeant, because of the relations that I've had and the trust that I've built with them. I can recall as a sergeant having those members from our department come to me and ask, would you please ask the police chief if we can march in the Pride Parade that's coming up this June? This is going back years ago. And I asked the police chief, and I obtained permission for them to march in the parade and to wear their uniforms proudly while they did that. They said, thank you, and will you march with us? Absolutely. So for years, and while I was still in Santa Rosa, I marched with them every year. I also assisted the first transgender individual in the police department to make that announcement to the police chief and others within the organization, because he was very uncomfortable in doing that. So I worked with him for about a month, working with him and HR to make that possible, so that that transition into coming out was safe for him and that there were no issues within the department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is a great question as well. You know, I think we have a community in the LGBT and queer who feel victimized often. They feel like when they've been the victim of a crime, if it's harassment or violent crime or hate crime, they don't feel like they can come forward and talk about that. They don't feel like they can report it. And so we have to create an atmosphere at the sheriff's office, and actually in all law enforcement, where they feel comfortable doing that. And one of the ways that we do that is we recruit and hire and retain a diverse workforce. So a diverse workforce is made of people who have a vast, broad range of experiences, who can relate to people. As I talked to you earlier, you know, when I first started law enforcement, I looked at the world through the lens of a white kid who grew up in Nevada. That was my lens. And it's changed a lot over my career. And we have to take that experience of people like me and share it with the younger people so they can get up to speed much quicker and have that great diversity in our workforce. Thank you.
As sheriff, you have to be an advocate for the LGBTQ community. You have to acknowledge their value. And you have to have contact with them. You have to go out and reach out to them and respect them. And you can't just do it like once in a while. It has to be part of your lifestyle, that you actually have close relationships with members of the LGBTQ community. I am blessed because I have family members from that community. I am well aware of the challenges they face, the bias they face, and my heart goes out to them. Part of it is being able to connect heart to heart with members of that community, authentically. My experience is when you do that, there is a relationship of trust. Now, when things come up, you have to reconcile them if they're not aligned in how they're being treated, and I will do that.
Thank you. Our third question is going to start with Mark. The share of the population, share of the population who are elders is increasing. Specifically, how do you intend to protect them from scammers and greedy people?
This is an issue that continues to surface. Ironically, there's a quick story that goes with that. I've actually been the victim of it in the last few weeks. So you may have read about it in the newspaper. Someone's been calling around to elderly folks particularly and saying, I'm Captain Mark Essick, you didn't show up for jury duty, you owe us $1,000. So we're investigating that right now. And you know, we've had some people come to the sheriff's office, they've showed up, they're crying, they have cash on them, and they're saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. Someone called me and told me I have to turn myself in to be arrested or give you money. And they didn't just target me, they targeted some other of our officials at the sheriff's office. So it is a huge deal. And the way we address that is through public outreach. I talked to the woman, I said, didn't you know we did a press release, we've been trying to put it on Facebook? And she says, I don't read the newspaper and I'm not on Facebook. So we've got to have other ways to get that news out there to folks, to educate them. And part of that is just having community meetings and constantly talking about the different scams that are out there. Thank you.
This is traditionally a low priority with law enforcement, and it's got to be raised significantly. One of the most important things is prevention. Reaching out to senior communities and educating them about this, and then having the sheriff actually show up and explain what the sheriff's office does. Now, elder abuse prosecutions are very difficult prosecutions. So we have to have highly trained investigators to be able to do that. And we also have to work very closely with the district attorney's office so that when we do identify these cases, we can have a successful prosecution. This is epidemic across our country, by the way. No one has done well. As sheriff, I will have a unit that will actually address these issues and make this difference. This is really an important area, particularly in our community of Sonoma County.
Thank you, John. I want you to meet Marvell Cox down here, a good friend of mine. Marvell, a wonderful lady, and I've known her for over 35 years probably. Nobody can get one over on her. She's losing her eyesight, and good luck trying to get one over on her. But you know what? It's about those relationships. In my role in law enforcement, as an investigator working some of these cases, I have very strong relationships with Adult Protective Services and the Council on Aging. There are others out there where we can work in partnership to identify what are the trends that we're hearing about out there in our communities as it relates to our aging population. And our aging population is growing, and it's growing big, and so is our youth. So we need to start looking at how we can focus more strongly on those vulnerable populations, which I mean our aging population and our youth as well. Because if we're not on top of it by connecting with the other providers and other organizations that work with them, we're going to miss the mark. So we need to make sure that we're on top of it and we identify the training needs for our organization to address those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be starting with John this time. How do you feel about concealed weapons permits?
Well, everyone has the right to a concealed weapons permit. Everyone does. The question is, who's qualified to have them? We need a rigorous process that includes background checks, mental evaluation, training, legal information, and we have to have someone who is highly responsible for a very deadly weapon. So in our county, we have such a process, and we don't have many of those permits going out. Other parts of the country, they go out pretty freely. Here, I see us continuing our current policy, acknowledging people who want to have one, but making sure that they're qualified to actually have that weapon. More guns out there in our society doesn't make us safer. So we have to be very thoughtful about this.
For about 26 years, Sonoma County law enforcement chiefs have had a countywide protocol. That is, every chief of police, the sheriff, the DA, chief probation officer, commander of CHP, others belong to this organization. They have had a policy that they agreed upon on how those are issued. I think right now it varies. We can have it between 130, 140 out there throughout the entire county. And there is no evidence, absolutely no evidence or study that you will find, and I encourage you to look for it, that supports that having more weapons, even legal weapons, out in the community makes communities any safer. And I disagree with Mr. Essick's goal to open that up and to allow anybody who passes a background and their including the psychological, to issue more concealed weapons in Sonoma County, because it's going to bring us into the thousands, and that's not okay. It's not the right step to go. I think we need to be focusing more on how we reduce gun violence in Sonoma County, not how we put more guns out into the public. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad I get to set the record straight. Ernesto's repeated this several times, and so it gives me a good chance here to respond to that. Like John, I believe that people have a right to apply for a CCW permit. We have a system in place in the state of California. We have a system in place here in Sonoma County. What I have a little bit of a problem with is that the 100 or so people who have CCW permits in this county are typically the friends of the police chief or the donors to the sheriff's campaign. And I think there are other folks out there who may have a need for a CCW, a need that they can articulate, that they should have an opportunity to have access to apply for a CCW. I do not plan on issuing CCWs to every person who walks in the door. That is absolutely to the contrary, and unfortunately it keeps getting repeated, but that is not the case. If someone has a need, and they can demonstrate a need, and they've been through the training, and they can demonstrate competency, then I would consider them for a CCW. Thank you.
It's going to be Ernesto.
Oh, it's good.
I promise. I know, it's a lot of musical chair here. Our next question is, what role does restorative justice have in Sonoma County?
Restorative justice has a big role. You know, I've been doing a lot of work in Sonoma County on youth and gang violence prevention, and a lot of that is resolving conflict. And those programs like that continue to expand in our schools, and there's more and more engagement. And what I like about it is there are community members who are participating as partners, and that's the big focus of the Santa Rosa Violence Prevention Partnership, is including a variety of different stakeholders throughout the community to identify strategies on reducing youth and gang violence. But we need to help our youth especially to understand the issues related to bullying, but also understand how the things that any of us do impact other people's lives. It's not just two people that are being impacted. There's almost a ripple effect when that occurs, and having restorative justice programs do help in helping people understand the breadth of the impact, really, of things that occur on our day-to-day lives. Thank you.
My first exposure to restorative justice was as a deputy working out in the West County. I had worked a case where a young man had done some vandalism at school, and they said, hey, would you be interested in participating in this program called Restorative Justice? And I said, sure, sounds like a great idea. What's going on? So it was my first exposure. I had a chance to sit down with the young man. I had a chance to sit down with the officials at the school, his parents, and we had a moment to talk about what his behavior was, how it affected others, and the consequences of that behavior. And it was very powerful. Later on, when I became a sergeant at one of our contract cities, the Windsor Police Department, we had a restorative justice program there that we absolutely supported. And what we used it for is we took people, young people, who had made mistakes, the same mistakes that all of us in this room have made. Petty theft, some vandalism, and we put them in this program. We diverted them out of the criminal justice system, and it was very successful. Just recently, I met with the new executive director of Restorative Resources here in Sonoma County. He's a great man. I look forward to working with the sheriff, and I've committed to do that. Thank you.
Restorative justice is a model that is not weighted toward punishment. It's weighted toward giving someone a second chance to see what is really at the source of causing them erratic behavior. And what we find is once we understand this, particularly with youth, once we understand it, we can keep them out of the criminal justice system. And they're held to accountability. So this is a very critical tool. The sheriff's office has given lip service to restorative justice. It's just coined another word for them. We do have a restorative resources organization in our county that's highly effective, and we're involved in expulsions at the school that saved us $500,000 in 1 year and saved so many kids. The sheriff has to be an advocate for this and strongly support this effort and direction instead of punishment.
Okay, so we'll be starting with Mark, sorry. I should have said something before you sat down. Okay, I have a little bit longer one here with a little bit of background. While I was held overnight at county jail, I was blindsided by 2 deputies and body slammed headfirst into the cement. I sustained a concussion. Despite my repeated attempts, no medical was rendered. This was an unprovoked instance of brutality, and I was completely ignored. My desk agent, who sat directly across from my cell, it was obvious I had no power and felt brutalized. How will you change this culture in jail?
Well, without knowing really the particulars of all that incident, it's hard for me to say. So taking it at face value, that's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. We've created a system, and that system here in Sonoma County is a group called ILERA. It's the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Outreach and Review. And what that group does is it allows people who feel they've been mistreated or have had a bad experience or a negative experience with the sheriff's office an avenue to complain, an avenue to be heard by someone other than someone like me at the sheriff's office. It's really hard to come in and complain to somebody in uniform who you're complaining against. So we've created this system. It's been a great program. It has been a learning process. We just got it started recently. But a person who has a bad experience can complain to an independent auditor, and that complaint will be investigated and it will be vetted by an independent person to make sure that the complaint is handled in a fair way, without bias, and that the law and the procedure are followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, first of all, I want to say how deeply sorry I am for that experience. It's traumatizing. It's difficult to get over. And it is a symptom of a culture within the jail that says that that's okay. There's currently litigation going on right now that is consistent with that kind of behavior. It's been caught on video. This has been going on for decades. And you know what? Inmates are not protected. They are not held in high regard. And they don't believe even if they complained, it would be helpful. So we've got to change the culture of the jail. Right now, there's high attrition rate in the jail. And if that continues, if people working 50, 60 hours a day, their stress will continue to have this kind of thing. It's got to stop. And I'm sorry for your experience.
I too am sorry for what happened, and in most situations that should not happen. And again, I encourage you to go on YouTube and look for those videos. It's yard counseling, so it'll take you right to Sonoma County. And if you look at that, that's almost what you're describing. And there's actually a policy that allows the correctional staff to go and remove somebody from their cell who is acting up to counsel them. And it's not okay. It doesn't do anything to build trust. That is not the kind of a culture that we want to support. I have heard from nursing staff at the jail that are concerned with some of these things that are occurring, and they share that even some of the other correctional officers are concerned about it too, and are kind of reluctant to be engaged in it, but they're part of a team. Unfortunately, inside the detention facilities is someplace that we don't ever have a chance to see unless you're booked into the county jail. But we need to find ways of ensuring that the IOLERA office has more access, regular access to the inmates that are in there so they can share their experiences and get the help that they need. Thank you.
Okay, John, you'll be starting with this question. How do you plan to address the excessive overtime in the department?
Excessive overtime is an indication of high attrition rates So all is not well with the morale because people don't want to come to work. And because they don't want to come to work, they look for opportunities to leave and go somewhere else. So that creates a spiral effect and has a very negative impact on the morale of the entire office. The job is tough enough without having that to contend with. So what can we do? We can get staffing levels up to acceptable levels so people are not working 50, 60 hours a week in the jail, for one thing. We can begin to engage deputies in how do we improve the system. Acknowledge them for the tough work they do, but have them help us look at ways to improve the system. They know. It takes leadership to listen and then implement what they say.
Coincidentally, I just received an email today from a former deputy who reached out to me asking that same question. If you're sheriff, what are you going to do? Because it's a problem. People are being overworked, and that's a big concern of mine too. If people are constantly overworked and stressed out, it doesn't make their interaction with the public any better. It impacts that. So we do need to have a very thorough staffing assessment to start. Where the staffing needs are, what are the deficiencies that we have, and how do we bolster that up? And it could be done through a variety of different ways, but it's going to require a very thorough evaluation of what exists now and what solutions can be financially possible, and it could be some restructuring that may take place. I don't know because I'm not in there yet, but I'm surprised that nothing has changed yet though with this ongoing overtime issue that's been going on for a number of years, but it still has not been addressed, and deputies are stressed out and they're looking for some change because they say morale is down, man, we're having a rough time in here, this is not good for us.
Again, I'll get a chance to set the record straight here by going last. 3 years ago, these statements that these gentlemen are making were quite accurate. Our average overtime for a deputy was about 25 hours a pay period, so 25 hours every 2 weeks. Our current overtime load for deputies is down to about 10 hours of overtime every 2 weeks. So we've significantly reduced our overtime for deputies. Correctional deputies are currently at about 24 hours of overtime every 2 weeks, so they're working about 10 hours a week overtime. It is a huge challenge. It is an absolutely huge challenge. Working in a jail is a very difficult place to work. It's very difficult. It's hard. And so the way we attract people there is we make it a more pleasant place to work. We try to take care of them as employees. There's a lot of great work coming out on research on how we take care of employees, how we empower them, let them have their voice, so that they feel that they're heard by management. So we've done a lot of great work. Again, I have the contrary. We are fully staffed right now for the patrol division, and we're within about 10 of being fully staffed in our correctional division.
Okay, so our next one, look at you, are you ready? So, what do you think about the suggestion that professional mental health practitioners work directly with officers as they respond to calls that may involve a person in a psychiatric state or depression?
That is something that we need to continue doing. We've done it with the San Jose Police Department wherever possible, is to send a team out or have people on call to be able to respond to major situations. A lot of my experience with the San Jose Police Department was as a crisis negotiator. I did that for probably 25 years, working with people in crisis and trying to find resolutions to the specific issues at hand. But we've always had somebody on contract with us to assist in some of those major issues or incidents to help resolve them. And resolving them to the point where we don't end up using a SWAT team to resolve it, because that's not always the best resolution. You know, sometimes just taking the time, there's nothing dynamic going on where we can have the luxury of time to continue having a discussion to try to find a solution for somebody is the best way, instead of trying to speed things up just for the sake of speeding it up and potentially using actual force and having somebody get hurt. So it's continuing to do that, and it's also for us at the county level, for all of us, is to demand that our mental health services are not cut. They're in jeopardy often. We need to really stress that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a great question. As I mentioned earlier, the CIT program that I worked on for the last 10 years, there's an evolution to that. And the evolution to CIT is what we call MST, Mobile Support Team. 3 years ago, through the work of Shirley Zane, who's done incredible work in mental health, she helped get funding. We've been asking for the mobile support team for about the last 6 years, and there just was not funding available at the county level to do that. And the side note is our society is not spending enough money on mobile or on mental health services for folks. It just clearly is not. And that's at the statewide level and the county level as well. But anyway, Supervisor Zane got some funding for us, and we created this mobile support team. It's been hugely successful. It only has a limited reach right now. It basically covers the 101 corridor from Petaluma up to about Windsor. We have 2 people in a car right now driving in the Petaluma area who are available to respond to a mental health emergency to assist officers, not just Sheriff's Office personnel, Petaluma Police Department, Cotati Police Department, Runner Park Police Department. It's a step, but we got to do a lot more. Thank you.
So in spite of the best efforts of the Sheriff's Office, this continues to be a very, very troubling area. We just had a mental health issue in Sonoma where a man died. This is not in any way achieve the kind of progress that we need to. Yes, a mobile response of professionals is helpful, but it has to be in time. They have to be out there and connecting and be able to respond. So far, there's a significant delay in response to people having a mental health crisis. And again, one of the most popular tools is a taser with mental health people. This has got to stop. More training for officers as well, for deputies. And it's a good opportunity, and I am not proud of where we are right now. We've got a long way to go.
Okay. Mark, we'll start with you on this one. What are the most important safety concerns in Sonoma County, and how would you address them?
Safety concerns. Well, there's a few going on right now with the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. We still have yet to come up with a real good way to measure someone's intoxication level when they're driving. Right now the state is working with UC Davis and researchers to try to figure out what is the threshold where someone should not be driving a vehicle after taking cannabis. It's a research study. The state's as part of Prop 64 has put money into this to research it, so that's a concern for me. We have seen a number of auto-related accidents that relate to not just cannabis. Let's face it, alcohol's the big one, right? But that is an upcoming concern. The other concern for me is really the homelessness issue, because these people are not getting the attention they need, they're not getting the services they need, and they continue to consume services from the Sheriff's Office, from other police departments. Because business owners, when they have a homeless person who's causing problems with their customers, they don't call anybody else but the cops, and we have to deal with that. So we're trying to get better resources out there to assist these folks who are in mental health crisis.
I think one area that really concerns me is that due to the legalization of cannabis, we have now become a target for predators who have the intention to come in and steal the cannabis, and in the course of that, if there's any resistance, to seriously injure or kill. These are people that need to be protected. We have to do a better job of identifying these predators and creating the prevention. And when they do attack, like they have, we have to be able to go after them, identify them, and prosecute them. Nothing sends a stronger message to the criminal enterprise than that. So we have to become hardened with our targets and protect people and serve notice on these people who would take advantage of us.
We have historically had violent issues, home invasions as a result of cannabis back when it was still illegal. It is now legalized, but we will continue to have to deal with those that choose not to be compliant with the laws and choose to grow cannabis illegally, especially massive amounts of it. And it will continue to be a target for others coming in. So we have to be very vigilant countywide on some of the issues related to the illegal cultivation and growing of marijuana. And also to be vigilant about the growing in remote areas of the county and the dangers to the environment that can be caused by that as well. But beyond that, we've had some opiate problems within Sonoma County, but I think more importantly, it's acknowledging that we have over 20 communities around Sonoma County, including our cities, that have unique issues. They have unique quality of life issues. And so as a sheriff's office, we need to understand that the quality of life issues that are important out at the river may be a little bit different than out in Sonoma Valley or Pangrove or in South County. So it's important that we always stay connected with those communities to ensure that we're on top of what's important to them at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
I'm sitting here busy
Deep
taking
in
notes.
concentration. I like it.
So I thought I already answered the question about it.
You did.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So it wasn't me. Okay.
He gave me side eye, and I fell
started.
for it.
I'm taking notes here.
He is. Thank you. Okay. John. Yes, he is.
It happens every time.
Smooth operating now? Sorry. Okay, our next question. Are you willing to punish or even fire an officer who is abusive towards the public?
So am I willing to fire or punish an officer who is abusive to the public? Absolutely. You know, unless we have accountability in the sheriff's office, in all law enforcement, we cannot gain the community's trust. So when we have incidents that indicate that a deputy has acted outside of policy, outside of training, people look to us, look to the sheriff to hold that person accountable. Now, there are long-standing relationships in a sheriff's office, and it impacts whether they do the right thing. So you've got to have a sheriff who's objective and will take action if it is required, and not step back, not defend or deny or rationalize the behavior, but hold the deputy accountable if that's what's called for. I will do that.
Absolutely, and I do applaud the sheriff's office who, I think you know, recently they fired somebody who on a body-worn camera was seen violating policy. And that's good. We need to have that accountability. And we also need to be reporting out to you on those incidents of excessive force too, so that you know real time how often these are occurring, how many people are being injured, how many officers are being injured, the types of weapons that are being used. There's a lot of data that we collect that I think is important for us to share with you to give you a better perspective and idea of what happens on a regular basis. To share with you the number of complaints that we get from individuals, whether they're founded or unfounded or unsustained. There's a lot of information that really goes to transparency, and part of that is on you to ask, what kind of information do you want and what can we legally give you? So we need to continue to work on establishing some of those processes, which will also include ensuring that all of our policies are available to you online so that you can know what they are and read them and understand them as well. Thank you.
This is an issue that I've always leaned forward on. And you know, as a captain at the sheriff's office, one of my primary roles as an administrator is discipline. And you know, I don't say this boastfully at all. In the last 18 months, I've had to fire 3 deputies. And to bring someone in your office and tell them today's your last day at the sheriff's office takes guts. It's hard. It's not easy to ruin someone's career. But it has to be done, because if people are not upholding the ethics of the sheriff's office, the policies, or the law, they must be held accountable. But you have to do it fairly. You obviously have to do it fairly. Everybody has a right to due process. But as Ernesto mentioned, unfortunately, one of the cases turned up to be a case in court. And I had to sit in the courtroom a few months ago and testify against one of our former deputies. And I had to stand there on the stand and say, what you did was wrong, and I want to hold you accountable for it. Our district attorney prosecuted that person. We didn't necessarily get the outcome that we were looking for in the prosecution, but we held that person accountable, and that has to be done. Thank you.
It's Ernesto, yeah. Okay, so given that it took 3 weeks for information to be translated into Spanish during the fires, how will you make sure that undocumented community will be treated the same way as U.S. citizens during the next natural disaster?
Yeah, it was shocking to learn that did happen during the disasters, is that Spanish language translations weren't going out, the information was getting out. But thanks to KBBF in Santa Rosa, who recognized that, stepped forward and just started translating what was happening on KSRO to get it out there, because there was a lot of our immigrant community that was in the dark about what was happening, what to do. And like I told you earlier, many of them fled to the coast because they didn't feel safe coming to the shelters. But this is something that we need to have already had established. We need to have strong relationships with all of our diverse communities to ensure that they have information readily available to them. We have a very diverse Sonoma County. We have Eritreans, we have Asians, we have a lot of people here. So we need to constantly evaluate where are we missing the mark and putting out information, including information on social media. Because a lot of people who don't speak English also use social media. So we need to constantly look at how we can fill some of those voids so that they too, it's about having equal access so that everybody's being treated the same, even with the information that we're putting out. Thank you.
You know, during the fire emergency, this was something that was brought up, and I think we were all unprepared. The state of California, California Department of Forestry, the city of Santa Rosa, the county of Sonoma were unprepared to communicate with people in a different language. We had minor programs available to do that, but it didn't work. That's why KBBF did such a huge community service, translating much of what was going on in the Press Democrat and on KSRO to the people who needed to get that information. One of the steps that we took right away at the Sheriff's Office is we instituted a program with our Nixle. I mean, probably a lot of people in this room have a Nixle account where they get those Nixle updates. We now have an option, and we didn't know it was out there. We had to ask, and I'm kind of shame on Nixle for not offering this to us. As soon as we found out, we grabbed it. Nixle has an option that when you sign up, you can sign up for Spanish language or actually many different languages. And because of your sign up in a different language, when we push a message out in English, it gets automatically translated. It may not be perfect, but it gets the point across. So I'm glad that we're doing that now, and I hope others follow suit.
It's not acceptable to have the immigrant community be an afterthought in an incident so horrific as our fires. You can imagine the panic and the fear and the anxiety that permeated that community. I mean, we have stories. So why was it an afterthought? Why did it take so long? Because again, there's not the relationship between the Sheriff's Office and the immigrant community. They didn't come up. Now, I appreciate that they finally caught up, but I assure you, we've got nothing to boast about in that whatsoever. We are required to give a huge apology to the immigrant community for having them as an afterthought in one of the most horrendous events we've experienced in this county.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad we got to get to so many questions from the audience. Thank you. I know those were quite a few. But I would like to invite the candidates to go ahead and give their closing statements. Again, you'll have 90 seconds. Oh, big change from 1 minute, huh? And you get to choose who starts. Whoever wants to start first. It's freedom.
I'll go first. 90 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Friday night, you're missing Warriors basketball, you're missing Giants game, and I appreciate your interest, and I'm glad that you're here. This is how the democratic process works. 24 years at the Sheriff's Office has taught me something. It's taught me how to listen. It's taught me how to meet with people and hear their concerns so that we can adapt and provide a better service to those concerns. It's taught me that we're all in this together. We can't arrest our way out of a situation. It's part about being a partnership, it's part of working with the community. The community expects that from us now. There's a reason that I've been endorsed by Sheriff Rob Giordano, probably one of the best leaders that we've had in the last few years. He led us through the fires. He did an incredible job of being transparent, honest, and engaging. The reason he endorsed me is because he sees the same qualities. He wants me to take the next step. He's heard my ideas. He's seen how I lead. He knows who I am as a man for the last 20 years that I've worked with him. And he has absolutely, resoundingly endorsed me because he sees what we need, where we need to be. I'm also proud that I have the endorsement of the majority of our Board of Supervisors, including Shirley Zane. Shirley's done incredible work in mental health. She knows my commitment to mental health, and that's why she's endorsed me. Going back to those three things, accountability, community policing, and diversity in our workforce. You've heard a little bit about it more tonight. I'd be glad to talk to you more after the meeting tonight to give you more information about that, but it looks like I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. So everyone in law enforcement, if you're going to make a shift in consciousness, there's a defining moment. There's a defining moment. And my defining moment is I was a captain, and I saw these two nuns who were in a very dangerous neighborhood that I was accountable for. And so I reached out to them and I told them, you have to get out of here. You will be killed. And they said to me, that's why we're here. And listen, Captain Mutz, you don't make things better here. You harass, you make people afraid, you arrest our young boys, you put them in prison, and you undermine the family fabric of this community. You make things worse. And I had to step back. Now, I went to parochial school and I was taught by nuns. So you have to know that they were very influential for me. But at that moment, I am so grateful that I realized that they were right. And conventional policing was wrong. It was comprised of many good officers, good intention, but it was a broken system, and it was making things worse. And I took my work with them on to 3 other commands, large commands, complicated commands, and I implemented what they taught me. And we increased the morale of those officers and restored trust in those communities. And I am eternally grateful for that defining moment.
Yeah, he was taught by nuns. Was this a great program? It was good. I'm glad. I was really happy with the number of questions that came from the audience. This is important because this is your forum. I have over 40 years of public safety experience, 30 of it with the San Jose Police Department. Since I retired in 2008, I have been continuing to work at the local, state, and national level on issues that are important to us here in Sonoma County, including reducing violence. That's been a big part of my work. The other part of my work has also been in helping communities to develop strategies to improve relationships and trust between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. I've been asked to speak on these issues at the state and national level, and people like Congressman Thompson, who has endorsed me, knows my work, and that's one of the reasons he endorsed me without hesitation. He has seen me do this for the last 12 years here locally, at the state and national level, and I will continue to do that on issues that are important to us here today, which also includes gun violence. And I'm so proud of the kids that were out there with the March for Our Lives, because you know what? I see hope. I see hope for Sonoma County. I've worked side by side with the Sheriff's Office for 30 years, and still, obviously, I'm still here. And I've seen them at their glory when they were a great organization, but they've kind of gone down a little bit, you know, and I don't like the culture that's there right now with the things that we hear about and read about it. There needs to be change. I am that outside candidate that brings a strong outside perspective with a breadth of experience on issues that matter to us today. And I think there is hope. There's hope for us, there's hope for our immigrant community, there's hope for everybody. If we can work together to make that change, we can improve Sonoma County. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our forum for tonight. I would really like to give a good round of applause and a thank you to the candidates for joining us tonight. And you guys can sit down if you, I have a little bit more here, sorry. We're very lucky to have this kind of event after so many years without a candidate option. And we want to thank you again, our co-sponsors, St. Vincent de Paul Church, Vidas, Petaluma Tomorrow, Petaluma Progressives, Petaluma Community Relations, and Relations Council, sorry, Petaluma Day Laborers Initiative, and especially to all of you, our community, for coming out here and engaging in this vital part of democracy. We have the power to educate ourselves and to decide for ourselves and to shape the community that we live in by helping it to grow in a healthy way. And this right here is an example of what North Bay Organizing Project does. We provide the space for the community to have access to the democratic process. This is how we build a flourishing community. Well, please stick around. We're here till 8. You can reach out to any of our members or our co-sponsors and have any questions or concerns, and pick the brains of the men who are coming up for this candidacy. And everyone, thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.